Hello, class. My name is Edwin Escobar, and my book analysis is on one of the worst coal mine fires in U.S. history, called Trapped, the 1909 Cherry Mine Disaster, written by Karen Tintori. The following quotes were pulled from the book to set the setting. Try to visualize this tragedy through these specific historical quotes from the mine survivors and witnesses. These words will help you imagine the suffering, the intense horror, and the agony from the effects of the fire that occurred in a mine in 1909 in Cherry, Illinois. Examples include the quote of men choking to death, men turning into human torches, and the deceased victims' limbs falling off. Picture yourself as an immigrant pursuing the American dream in Illinois during the boom of the coal industry. Times were tough, and so was the work. It was hard labor, dirty, backbreaking, and dangerous. Daily hazards included poisonous gases, coal dust, explosions, cave-ins, an occasional small fire, but the pay was decent. There are numerous declarations about the Cherry Mine rated as the safest in the world and fireproof, much like how people describe the Titanic was unsinkable. This slide shows Cherry Mine and its two passageways in or out of the mine, two vertical shafts sunk 300 feet apart. The hoist-ring shaft ran cages of men or coal between the surface and the second vein, while the air shaft operated its cages only between the second vein and the third. The ventilation fan you see is controversial in the numerous rescue courses of action to put out the fire. Within the two veins or levels, there were numerous tunnels where the miners would work. 480 to 500 miners, both men and boys, went to work on the fateful 13th day of November in 1909. Starting as a small fire in a cart intended for hay bales for the mules, the fire seemed typical, but later raged when it couldn't be extinguished. As the fire spread, the timbers holding the roofs ignited. The miners who attempted to move the cart could not do so due to the heavy smoke and the fire. Eventually, the second vein was on fire as the fire continued to grow, trapping 250 miners. The hazards now introduced are complete darkness, pandemonium, asphyxiation, dehydration, hunger, and with a lack of fresh air, the tunnels developed black damp. Soon the miners were dealt with rotting mule carcasses, fallen debris, and death. Many factors impacted the event, which includes the lack of communication assets, a mix of different languages spoken, thousands of spectators, miscommunication and contradicting information at press conferences, a lack of command, fire departments good distances away, no accountability of the miners, and a serious lack of life-saving equipment. The miners did not execute training or conduct drills. The engineers were not trained and certified. And lastly, the lack of access to water posed cascading effects. There were no SOPs during this time. The probability of this fire was high due to the workplace environment. There were numerous vulnerabilities in the design of the mine. The severity was catastrophic, as this disaster proved to be a focusing event for the nation. There were advances in charity organizations, namely the American Red Cross. A Federal Bureau of Mines was created with the help of Congress, and most importantly, the Illinois Worker Compensation Act of 1910. Sadly, there was a legislature that enforced child labor laws. There was engagement from the U.S. Geological Survey scientists and a new awareness in disaster planning. After reading the book, I truly appreciated the writer's inclusion of journal entries from the miners, their thoughts, their fears, and mentions of the Brotherhood. Chapter 25 made me feel like I was in an actual movie with a strong desire to see the outcome. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and she included many, to include the layout of the mine to fully comprehend the situation and the challenges they dealt with. A potential weakness was that the book was in a chronological manner and a factual read, where some readers prefer an analytical view, much like the engineers, since it involved mining engineering. Possibly other disciplines, like scientists, would appreciate that perspective as well. There was also a total of 10 boys in this disaster, all under the age of 16. Four of them were killed in the fire. What a fantastic and lost opportunity to dive into their own testimony and have accounts from them as well. Lastly, there was a 3-year gap between the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, and some of the lessons learned from a local, state, and federal response would have been functional in this book if they had used some of that recent experience. Thank you for your time, and I highly recommend reading this book. It's highly engaging and a must-read to understand the plight of our U.S. coal miners. I give it 5 stars out of 5.